Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast this week. Hope everyone's been having a good week. So I'm Brendan Valentine here this week with Dan Draper and Hope Gooderl, and we're really excited to talk to you this week. We have a fun main topic. We're going to be talking about adaptations. But before we get to that, we have a fun little opening question for you. So this week we wanted to to get to know like the new hosts, since we're all still getting used to the podcast. Are gonna answer a question like at the beginning of each week. And this week's question is, if you had to choose which element you could bend from the Avatar series, which element would you bend? So I think we'll have Hope start it off if you want to.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Hope Gooderl. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. So I will admit, I don't watch Avatar. I might have seen like 1 or 2 episodes if a friend was like, hey, this show is really cool. But as far as any element that I would like to bend would definitely be water. I absolutely love going to the beach or going to a pool. I'm definitely a person who wants to live by water, be in water all the time. I'm energized by water, so I feel like that would definitely be a good choice for elements of what element I would like to bend if I was an Avatar.
All right,
Awesome.
I guess I'll go next, and after that, hi, I'm Dan. I think, like, I have actually seen Avatar, so I know there's like a correct answer, and it's definitely Earth. Earthbending is broken in Avatar between the shows, like both shows and like any comics. Like earthbending, you literally, Avatar Kyoshi just made herself live longer because of earthbending. She lived to be like 250, I think. So there's that. There's also subsets of it. You can lava bend, which is crazy. Like it's basically just fire bending, except it's through earth, so it's easy. And then also there's metal bending, which is explored a lot in Legend of Korra, and that stuff you just can't lose. I think earthbending is broken, and it's not even close with the other ones. But that's just me. I'm just going strictly based off power level.
No, that's fair. Honestly, that's not an argument I really considered, but now that you've said that, you haven't changed my mind right now, but I will think about it a little bit more. So for me, when I finished originally watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, I was like, oh, firebending all the way, because I like lightning bending. But after I watched Korra, it's changed my mind. I would definitely want to be an airbender. After watching Zahir. If you haven't seen Korra, sorry, minor spoilers, I will not spoil the whole thing, but after seeing the season 3 villain, which happens to be an airbender, I was like, no, I definitely would want to be to airbend, because unlocking that like ability of flight too, just being able to like float around would be insane. And then the one thing that I always like try to remember when watching the show is they animate the air so like we can see it. But like if you were really airbending, people would not be able to see you moving the air around. So you could be so sneaky with that. And that's the thing that kind of like had me like when I was thinking with firebending, I'm like, cool, create fire out of thin air. But I'm like, but with airbending, air is usually everywhere.
Also, he takes the air out of the Earth Queen's lungs. That's a spoiler, but I mean, it's a cool one. You'll still think it's cool.
That was a cool
He
move.
literally air bends the air out of her lungs. Like, come on.
Mm-hmm.
What?
My theory with the elements too is like, because of like the gray areas, it's actually like states of matter, not like elements. But we won't get into that. Today's episode isn't about Avatar.
Okay, I do have a quick question, because you guys were talking about like powers, and like Dan was talking about lava bending and all that. So with water, because humans are like 70% water,
watch the show.
right?
Watch the show before you finish it. Watch the show.
That gets explored.
Yeah, we know exactly where you're going. Every element has its subset, and that's one of them.
Except for air. Air you can't really do much with.
I mean the flight ability, I guess.
Yeah. He also spoiler. I can't get into it. Lots of spoilers.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of things, but all right. So then I think we're going to move on to our next part. Just see what kind of geek news is going. So Dan, do you have anything to bring up on that front?
Yeah, I just had one thing that I saw this past week. Oscar Isaac was confirmed to be playing Moon Knight.
That got confirmed? I thought it was just a rumor.
No, it was confirmed. They had rumors
wow.
going around of like other people who were going to be it. The Oscar Isaac, I think, was confirmed to be playing Moon Knight, who, for those of you who don't know or aren't too familiar with the comics, like I I haven't read any like Moon Knight comics myself, but to my basic understanding, he's basically like that Marvel's Batman. Like, I mean, everybody like compares like Iron Man and Batman, but like this guy's like literally like Batman. Like he throws like moon rings instead of batarangs. So like, and he doesn't really have powers. He has like a costume. So yeah, that should be really cool. I like Oscar Isaac. And
I was pulling for Keanu Reeves for that one. I thought that would have been really funny. But Oscar Isaac, definitely a good choice and definitely more longevity, I think, than Keanu Reeves in the role.
Yeah, plus he's already kind of integrated into Disney with, the Star Wars sequels, which I enjoyed Oscar Isaac, and I think he was one of the better parts of it. Sure, his character writing wasn't great, but his acting was pretty good, and I think he'll do a good job.
Mm-hmm. Hope you got some stuff for us?
Yeah, I do. I have a few different things. So there is a new Marvel series on Hulu called Hellstorm. Yeah, I like just saw a trailer for it on YouTube, and it is on Hulu, and it's got like 10 episodes. What IMDb says for it right now is Damon and Anna Hellstorm are the son and daughter of a mysterious and powerful serial killer. The siblings have a complicated dynamic as they track down the terrorizing worst of humanity, each with their attitude and skills. And it looked really interesting, but also like dark. So I was like, ooh, do we get to see a dark side of Marvel? So that is something that I'm definitely going to check out. Anyone's a Marvel fan, I would definitely go check that out.
Hellstrom. Okay.
Hellstrom. Sorry, I said
no,
it
you're
wrong.
good.
The other thing, going off of Marvel, is filming has started for Spider-Man 3 in Atlanta. Woo! If you guys were here last week listening to our podcast, we talked a lot about that. So yeah, Tom Holland posted on his Instagram story showing the iPad that held the script, to which of course he broke the case for the iPad. Fantastic. Good job, Tom Holland. He says that he learned his lesson the last time he spoiled things and that he's not going to do it again. I don't think that's true because it's Tom Holland and he always finds a way to spoil things, whether he realizes it or not.
Or Disney will turn it into like a marketing campaign.
Yep, exactly. Like what they did with the Avengers Endgame poster, I believe it was. And then for any musical lovers, especially if you love the musical Wicked, the movie, which was supposed to come out like 4 years ago, has been pushed again. So it was going to be released next year, December, but it is now later. Universal has not said when they're having it, but I guess it's making way for Sing 2. So I guess there's a sequel to that cute film. I don't know how they're going to make a sequel to Sing 2, but they're doing it. So yeah, that's my geek news.
Interesting.
I actually have one more piece of geek news I totally forgot about, but you reminded me with that, talking about delays. Cyberpunk 2077, the most anticipated game I've ever seen ever, got delayed for the third time. And at this point, I'm convinced it's not actually going to come out. I don't think it's real anymore. But it was crazy because at first, when they first set a release date, they put for, I think, like April 10th or something. So like months ago. And then they delayed it to November. Or actually, I think they delayed it to September. And then they delayed it to November. And now they're delaying it until the holiday season. So it won't be out until December 10th. So, yeah, that game, who knows when it's going to happen.
Well, as a Mass Effect fan, a delay is always better than a rushed release like we got with Mass Effect Andromeda. So, I don't know. Delay to me is always, it's, bad news, but take it with a grain of salt because it means they're actually putting effort into your game that you want to see.
See, I wouldn't be upset with the delay, but they keep giving dates and then they just say, okay, never mind. Like
that's fair. I mean, but at least they have like a date and then like it gives you something to look forward to.
Right. Yeah.
I guess. I mean, I'm trying to look on the bright side of it. No, I just feel bad
for the people who like keep requesting off days from work and then all of a sudden they have to go to their boss and say, hey, I need different days off now.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
I guess you should wait until like the month before then, just to make sure that it's the actual day before
Or
requesting time
They
off.
don't give dates they can't hold.
That's fair. Or you're ambiguous to your boss. Hey, I'm gonna need a day off when Cyberpunk 2077 eventually releases.
Yeah, who knows that
But-
when that's gonna be?
And then hope related to your Wicked news, Defying Gravity has come on when I've hit shuffle a couple times the past few days. So that's when you said that, I'm like, oh, I've been in a Wicked mood recently. But my geek news real quick. For those of you who have watched Amazon Prime's The Boys, season 2 just wrapped up and it was really, really good, but they've had minor season 3 news. The piece of news that we got was the actor who plays the main character, or one of the main characters, Homelander, who is the if you haven't seen the show, he's the villain, even though he looks like he's supposed to be the hero. But the words he used to describe his character in season 3 are homicidal maniac, which makes me extremely excited because it's been teased in these past seasons that he's kind of going to go off the deep end. So I think they're finally going to do it.
Yes.
So that was super exciting. Also, at the time of filming this podcast, we are about, I think, 7 hours away from the release of The Mandalorian season 2 on Disney Plus. So if you're a Star Wars fan, get hyped for that. I'm sure we'll be talking about that soon in the future. Once it comes out, we can give a quick review of it. Talk about highs and lows of the season, even though I predict, very few lows. The season 1 set a pretty good precedent. And then my last bit of geek news was this past week, the second part of the Pokemon Sword and Shield DLC got released, the Crown Tundra. So far, I've heard some pretty positive reviews on it. The consistent negative thing I've heard is that legendary Pokemon are too easy to catch, but that has been a pretty consistent critique of the most recent, past 2-3 generations of Pokemon games. So not surprised, but everyone says, it's worth getting. And if it's this new era of DLC with Pokemon games, a good first batch is not a bad thing. So that's what I was thinking.
The new raid system looks really cool for that. I've seen you can go with your friends and get you just go through a path and you find a legendary at the end. It seems pretty cool from what I've seen.
Yeah, people enjoy the process. They're just kind of wish it was more difficult because I've had it for 2 days and I have them all.
Yeah.
So there's that. All right. So from after news, we're going to just get right into our main topic. So today we're going to be talking about our favorite and least favorite adaptations. Just in general, this isn't anything specific. So it could be a comic to a movie adaptation, a novel to a movie adaptation, a movie to a movie adaptation, a comic to a comic, book to book. We kind of left it open format when we were putting this together. So I think we'll all start. We'll give our favorite adaptation of all time, have a quick discussion, and then move on to the next person. So, Dan, do you want to start us off with your favorite adaptation of all time?
Yeah, I can go. I don't know if this is my favorite of all time, but I think it's a really good one that's worth bringing up. I kind of stuck with movies today, and my favorite, or one of my favorite adaptations, was Detective Pikachu. I think that was I wasn't exactly faithful to the game Detective Pikachu, but I don't think it really needs to be. I think what I just wanted to see was a good video game to movie adaptation, and I think they finally got it for once, because normally the formula has just been really bad in the past. You just get really bad movies that aren't complete, and they just kind of rely on the fan bases of those games. And I think Detective Pikachu does a good job of bridging that gap into being appealing to anybody, even if you don't know the Pokemon series as any sort of extent. And I think that's a really good job. Plus, it has Ryan Reynolds in it, so you get that appeal factor right there. And I just think overall it's a really great movie, and if you haven't seen it, you really should. There's really nothing that can get spoiled for you, because all the twists you can see coming 2 miles away. You're not if somebody spoils it ahead of time, you're still gonna have a good time, I think. So yeah, go see Detective Pikachu.
When I saw it in theaters, it was a blast. It was a genuinely fun time at the movie.
Uh-huh.
So although Dan, you used the word faithful with adaptations, how important do you think being faithful to the source material is? especially like if Detective Pikachu is your favorite, because for me it's a big deal, but I know it's like it isn't for everyone.
See, I think it depends, because like how should I word this? If being faithful is gonna make it bad, don't be faithful. Because I think a really good example of this is you look at Thor in the Marvel movies and you look at Thor in the comics, and there is a very distinct difference. Thor in the comics, he is not like this quippy, wisecracking, like goofball. Like look at him in like Thor Ragnarok, he's kind of an idiot, and it kind of works really well. So like, I don't know. I think that people shouldn't feel limited by their source material. I think if you see a change that makes sense, they should do it, but also they shouldn't avoid it altogether just because. I think if something will work and you think it'll work between like the mediums, I think you should do it, but don't feel like you have to if it's going to be bad.
No, that's a really good point, because like we never would have gotten like Bro Thor from Endgame in the comics. Like that would have never happened. But like that was one of my favorite parts of Endgame. That was great.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, oh, and then speaking of like video game to movie adaptations, what did you think of the Sonic movie if you saw it?
I haven't got the chance to see it, and that makes me really sad because I wanted to dunk on that movie really hard. I
heard really good things about it.
See, I'm really sad that things ended up the way they did, because I really wanted them to stick with the bad, like just the terrible looking Sonic, because then I could go to that movie and if it's bad, I can laugh ironically. But now if I go and I see the Sonic movie and Sonic looks good, but the movie's bad, I'm just sad now because they think Sonic looks great and the movie is just terrible.
I think you're safe.
Sorry, I was gonna say, wasn't that from like fans saying that they wanted Sonic to look better? So like the creators were like, okay, well if it'll make you see the movie.
Yeah, that happened, but I'm not surprised that it happened. I'm definitely glad it did. Did you see what like the original like Sonic like CGI mess looked like? It was terrible. It looked like something creepy. Out of my nightmares.
They're like anatomically correct Sonic. I'm like, no. That's not what makes Sonic Sonic.
Let's give Sonic a human smile. That'll look good.
That's like all the live action Stitch renditions that I have been seeing, that they're like, yeah, Disney's gonna make a live action Stitch, and I'm like, that Stitch is creepy. He's supposed to look cute and cuddly because, you know, he's trying to get adopted, and that Stitch is not getting adopted. So, you know, big, bulky, muscly Stitch. Not a thing.
For that, they could always, like, at the beginning when he has, like, the four arms, make him, like, that weird, creepy thing, and then he does his little, like, shapeshift part, and they're like, oh, huh. What does he say at the end of the first movie? When Gantu's like, you know, oh, also get rid of him.
And then, and cuddly.
Oh, yeah. Cute and fluffy. Like that one.
Also cute and fluffy.
There we go. I remember that. So, yeah, you need that aspect of Stitch. Yeah. So, all right, a little off topic, but Hope, what is your favorite adaptation of all time?
Okay, well, like, I want to point out that there are a bunch of adaptations out there that people might not know. Now, granted, a lot of the adaptations that I said are all book to movie or TV show. But so first, the movie The Da Vinci Code is actually a book by Dan Brown, but it's the second in the series. And Angels and Demons, which is the first book, is the second movie. Another one, 13 Reasons Why, was also a book. So people who get mad about the TV show being made need to go read the book first. Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime, if anyone's a fan. There's a book series by Tom Clancy. Although the Jack Ryan in the books is set like back during the Cold War era, and he actually becomes president at one point, like vice president, and the president's killed, and then he becomes president and then elected president. But so the Amazon Prime is just kind of loosely based on the character. Really, well, not really old. Like this was 16 years ago, which is kind of really old. But the movie Ella Enchanted with Anne Hathaway was also originally a book. But as far as like my favorite adaptation would either be the Shadowhunters TV series or the Narnian Chronicles, any of the Narnian movies. Which now, granted, Narnia books are, yay big and big words, like font size. But honestly, like, for how little detail C.S. Lewis actually put into those books about what Narnia looks like, watching the movies, like, even as a little kid, I was like, yep, that's what Narnia looks like. Yep, that's exactly right. And they really didn't even stray that far from characters either. Like, they stayed true to the characters. And I really liked that part. So Shadowhunters was a TV series that was based off the Mortal Instruments book series by Cassandra Clare. And it was actually a lot closer to the books than the movie was. At least that's what I heard. I will be honest, I'm not a fan of Lily Collins, and she was in the movie, and I was like, I can't watch this. But I mean, they did have some parts where I was like, wait, why are you doing that now? But they just basically had to reframe some stuff. But honestly, it wasn't too far from the book series, and I thought that was pretty good about it. But yeah, so either Narnian series or Shadowhunters.
Did you ever read all of the Narnia books?
Yes, I read all of them in order. So not in publishing order, which is how the movies were made. I did it based on chronological order, which is how you'll find most of the books in the box sets is 1, 2, 3. But I did read all of the books, and I'm waiting for them to make more Narnian movies, because the whole reason they stopped was they lost the rights for it. But I think that's coming up soon, that they should be able to get the rights back. But then they'd kind of have to like redo some of it, because if they want to continue with the story or if they just want to redo it completely.
So if they do redo it completely, which book would you be looking most forward to being adapted?
If they redid it completely, I'd kind of like to see, I mean, just start back at number 2 again. I mean, they could, I personally, having the, so it's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader that became movies. I would actually like to see the first book.
Me too.
Because like that gives how Narnia was created and like the whole lamppost thing, and I think that would be so cool to do that and to show, like, especially now with like effects, movie graphics and everything being what they are. Like, I think doing the whole pond area where like they went to the different worlds, I think that would be so cool to do. And like showing how things just sprouted up because they put it down, like the lamppost, it just grew roots.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't read like the first, like who have seen the Narnia movies but haven't like read the books, the first book gives like a lot of context to like, you know, like where Aslan came from, like what Narnia is, where it came from, how the wardrobe even works, and a lot of like in-world stuff. You're like, as a kid, you're probably just like, oh, fun, like this is just how the world is. But like actually reading the book, and as like someone who's really big into world building, that book for me was like, holy crap, that makes the second book so much better.
Well, and like I'm gonna say this too, the White Witch for me was kind of like the wizard in Wizard of Oz, because like she doesn't actually have supernatural powers, but because she's able to like harness the magic of a new world and new universe, that she's able to just create whatever she wants. And it's kind of like, you know, Wizard in Wizard of Oz. He doesn't actually have magic, but he's able to get the effects in and to pretend he's all powerful. And
yeah, I enjoyed the what?
I'm trying so hard to remember everything about this, because when I was growing up, I read all the books and I watched all the movies, and then my mind is just drawing the biggest blank right now. It's probably been over a decade since I have seen anything remotely related to Narnia.
Well, and like the first book isn't even, I the original characters. I mean, you have one because it's the professor was actually there when Narnia was created, which is why, like, at the end of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like, he's like, oh, you went into the wardrobe, and they're like, there's nothing there. He's like, but there is. That, like, you know, he was there at the beginning, and they actually, like, talk about the different ways that they got to the pools to create the different universes.
Oh, by the way, if you haven't read the book, pools, basically it's like multiverse theory type stuff. They're like portals.
Yeah, basic. Yeah, and they go through a couple different portals before they finally land on the Narnian one. But yeah, I think definitely they should do that one, because then that would just build on the Narnian universe. And then if they had to make one more, I'd definitely say the very last book, because then we could get all the actors from the original back. I'm not going to spoil, because
if you haven't read the Narnia books and have any excuse to go read them, definitely worth it. Yes. So I think we should get moving on to our next.
What's yours? You didn't talk about what your favorite adaptation.
That's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So if you haven't noticed the theme with my Zoom background and my Red Wings Batman shirt, my favorite adaptation is Batman related. And I think the best adaptation of anything to anything all time is Batman the Animated Series. And that's not just the nostalgia factor of that being like a staple of my like childhood viewing habits, but I actually wrote a 7-page paper in a class over the summer about why Batman the Animated Series is the best comic book adaptation of all time. So I won't go on and like read you the paper, but I'll give you the gist. So I'm a comic book fan, and when I got into comics, it was mostly Bronze Age Batman comics that I got into, like, and the big stories like Long Halloween. I guess Dark Knight Returns is in there, and Killing Joke are like things that I really got into. And when watching the series, I could still see the parallels between like that Batman from the Bronze Age and all like his rogues gallery, the Joker, as like the big villain, especially in Killing Joke. And I could see those parallels there, but it wasn't quite as like dark and gritty. So you still had that, if you're familiar with like the different like versions of Batman from the different eras, you could kind of see parallels of Batman from the Golden Age, where it's like this gritty crime fighting, like the most human superhero of the time, because you also had like Superman, but he wasn't like, he was an alien, literally wasn't human. So like Batman, Bruce Wayne, was like, I guess more down to earth, even though like he is a billionaire. But then you also had the Silver Age stuff, which was a little more tame, which you had to have as like a children's show. But it's still, I rewatched it as, I guess I'll call myself an adult, but and like it's still like ridiculously fun to watch. It's like, it is funny, but it also has like the dark, gritty atmosphere of Batman. But what I think, like, besides just being like a faithful adaptation, but mixing the different eras of Batman, it also kind of was innovative as well. Like a lot of the stuff that I feel gets made from comic books, it's like reiterating these stories and isn't necessarily doing something like incredibly new with it. But I felt like the Batman the Animated Series, as much as it was impacted by the comics, it's impacted like the whole idea of Batman. I feel like watching Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, there's a lot was drawn from Batman the Animated Series. Like, this is what people like about Batman, I'm going to put this in my movies and put my own twist on it. And heck, even the character of Harley Quinn, which is like a mascot for DC now, was created in the Batman the Animated Series show. Like, just as she was supposed to be just like a one-off character, and now she's in movies every year, has her own DC Universe show, and is, you know, pretty much a household recognizable name. If you haven't seen Batman,
I didn't realize she originated from the series. I could have.
Oh yeah. I
thought she was a comic book thing through and through.
Nope. Her first appearance in the comics didn't come to like a couple years after she showed up in the show.
That's crazy.
I know. Like you think of how big she is now. She was supposed to literally just be a one-off character, just like a goon. And then people were like, "Oh, that's kind of fun." And now she's become her own character. And then, if you haven't seen, the Joker has a new girlfriend. In the comics,
she dumped him, right? In like Suicide Squad, the movie, a few years ago. She like dumped him because she realized what an ass he was.
Well, that's happened several times. Very unhealthy relationship, not the greatest. It's always been really weird. And that's one of actually the darker points of Batman the Animated Series, because like they don't necessarily shy away from showing that like the Joker is a domestic abuser. Like it's not, they're not like, I mean, it is still a children's show, but like it's pretty dark, especially looking back at it as an adult, getting the whole context. Like that's like, you know, the Joker's a villain, but like he's a bad guy.
You don't realize how much of an actual villain he is.
Exactly. Like one of my favorite Doctor Doom moments, I know we talked about him last week, was in one of the comics. In Marvel Comics, 9/11 happened, and Doctor Doom worked with the Avengers to like, a lot of villains did, but like Doctor Doom was like, man, these guys are just awful. And I'm like, okay, that like as much as he's a villain, like you see, he's not the worst. Like there's a little bit that you can redeem. Joker's not like that at all. So
I think that's kind of what makes Joker like a good villain, though, because like he is just the all-around bad guy and like no redeemable qualities, so you want to hate him. Like you kind of like him because you're like, yes, you're a really good bad villain, but like you're also just like, I hate you because you're so evil and vile.
He's just awful.
I will say though, really quick rant there, that Heath Ledger is my favorite Joker of all time. I had nightmares, and because I watched that movie in the dark at like midnight. Yeah, that was not a smart move. But so to ask you, Brendan, like, would you definitely say that you would choose the animated series over Christopher Nolan or any live action Batman?
If that's the only Batman I can ever consume, yes. Also, Mark Hamill as the Joker, like, killed it. I know for a lot of people, as like Mark Hamill will always be Luke Skywalker, but for me, like hearing his voice, I'm like, that's the Joker. Like, and I feel like that series also, like the voice actors, like they made the like they're the definitive voice. Mark Hamill is the Joker. Why am I drawing a blank? Who voiced Kevin Conroy voiced Batman? Like, and he is Batman. And in my head, like as much as everyone else like doing the I'm Batman voice, I'm like, it's not the same as Kevin
You're
Conroy.
saying Michael Keaton is not your Batman.
I love Michael Keaton. I love those movies, but like have you watched Batman the Animated Series?
No.
Okay.
I will be honest.
I don't remember the like season and episode, but like where he does like his most iconic line where he's like, I am vengeance. I am the night. I'm Batman. I'm like, that gave me chills, and that is good. That's impressive for a kid's show. Like
so,
the reason Batman the Animated Series is my favorite is like I feel like it's definitive Batman, and Batman's one of my favorite heroes.
So Lego Batman doesn't give you the same chills when he says
Not the same, but I also enjoy Lego Batman. Like the movie is fun. Like it's hard to go wrong with Batman, even in that context.
The Lego Batman movie, honestly, it might be one of the Batman adaptation or just like Batman interpretations, I should say, that I enjoy the most. I thought the it was dumb funny. I don't want to go on like a huge like rabbit trail about Lego Batman the movie. I just wanted to chip in that it's pretty good. I enjoy it.
And Will Arnett did a great job as Batman. I thought that was very fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess shifting here from like very positive stuff, looking at more of the negative side of adaptations, because unfortunately sometimes, like Dan alluded to with all of the video game movies, not all adaptations are good. And some adaptations are like, we just want to like, get the fan service. This is a recognizable title. We want to pull this in. So I guess I can start on this one too. Dan, when I asked you earlier, how important is like faithfulness to the source material to you? My answer is like, it's very important. It's like, if not the most important, like definitely in like the top 3 of most important things when considering an adaptation for me. And while this is one of my favorite shows of all time, but as an adaptation of its source material, it's not great. It's, if any of you have seen the show Lucifer on Netflix, it's actually an adaptation of the comics of the same name. Lucifer was originally introduced in Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics. And then he got his own spin-off series and now the Netflix show, and it looks so different. like I saw the show first and then I went back and read some of the comics. I'm like, I enjoy the comics. Like the one of the arcs it's called the Morning Star arc, and in the gist of it is like Lilith, like I didn't read some of the comics before, but Lilith has returned, is trying to take over heaven. Lucifer is trying to stop that from happening, but there's a bunch of other things going on. But Lucifer is this like weird otherworldly, like he does not live in LA and does not work with the LAPD at all in the comics. Like LA just isn't a thing. And he doesn't have the Tom Ellis swagger and accent. Like he's still like cool-headed Lucifer, but it's not like Tom Ellis. And if you watch the show and read the comics, you would now be able to tell they're the same thing. And like to me, faithfulness is important. And I loved Lucifer so much. And when I was going to read the comics, I'm like, if this is the show, the comics must be great. With all this, like I was expecting him to be quippy and fun and like have all this stuff, like all the like fun detective stories. And then I read the comics. I'm like, this isn't it at all. Not the same thing.
See, I enjoyed the show. Like I didn't for right now, I didn't know it was a comic that it was adapted. Because like my girlfriend and I'll watch the show and I think it's great. I think Lucifer, he's funny. His interactions like within the real world I think are hilarious. And just like seeing just like the concept in itself I think is really good. So I'd like to hear that it's like a less than faithful, I should say, adaptation is weird. Just like considering like if you say like both are good, but like the adaptation itself is bad.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. They're both good, and like the comics are worth the read, and the show's definitely worth the watch. But I'm not saying if you like the show, you're not necessarily going to love the comics, and if you like the comics, you're not necessarily going to love the show because they're not quite the same thing. Because like you just said, what I love most about the show was like just like kind of the weird premise of like the devil has decided to stop ruling hell, and he's just going to hang out and own a club in LA and just kind of do whatever the heck he wants.
Devil has a retirement plan.
Exactly. That's hilarious. And then he starts solving murders with the LAPD. Perfect. And I also like when it gets a little deeper, like the whole philosophical aspect of it too. Like, is the devil really evil, or is the evil within us? And like this whole thing with it. And that, like, when a show makes me like laugh and think at the same time, I'm like, perfect.
What's the premise of the comics then, if it's not, him crime solving? He's
similar idea, not like crime solving, but like there are supernatural problems, like heaven and hell disputes with other angels. Like as much as Amenadiel is like a big part of the show, not as big of a part in the comics. Like literally every human character in the show, Dan, Ella, Charlotte Richards, and Chloe, don't exist in the comics. So the premise of the comics is, yes, Lucifer no longer wants to rule hell, but Lucifer is not crime solving with the LAPD. Like the first comic opens, it's again him and Maze. I don't remember what city it is. It's been a while since I read that comic, but it's him and Maze going to do their thing. But then he goes and threatens a bookstore owner who knows he's the devil and is still doing devilish things. So it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite the same thing. It still has a bit of that like philosophical debate that I like from the show, which is what I like to get out of the comic. But I don't know, it's weird. Watching one and then reading the other, I was like, this is not what I was expecting. And I feel like that's what kind of always like put it in my head is like not the greatest adaptation. So I definitely biased, but I'm putting it out there.
Yeah, so that's interesting that like both are good, but just like it's just not the same at all.
Yeah, good in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Dan or Hope, do either of you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. So kind of clinging into like our little intro question we have with like the Avatar stuff, I'd say my example of a bad, I'm just gonna, it's bad, is the Avatar, the Last Airbender movie. Actually, it didn't say Avatar because rights stuff was going on, because Avatar Blue People was released that same year. But the Last Airbender by M. Night Shyamalan might be the worst thing I've ever seen, ever. It was terrible. The actors were terrible. The casting for the roles was terrible. The editing, terrible. The CGI, terrible. God awful. Just everything about this movie that he could have got wrong, he got exactly wrong. And the best part about it is that it was M. Night Shyamalan's vision, unobstructed. They gave him full creative liberties to do whatever he wanted to translate Avatar: The Last Airbender, beloved TV show by all, and put it into a movie. And he got to do whatever he wanted and just butchered it. It was just the worst thing you've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix, and you really need to do yourself a favor and watch this movie, because within 10 minutes you will not want to watch it anymore.
Watch it with a group and make fun of it. That's might be the only way you can get through it.
You could make a drinking game out of it, I'm sure. Anytime you see something that's terrible, just drink.
Dude, you get alcohol poisoning.
For that, though.
Oh.
You can't it's like with the presidential debates, you know? You can't do the drinking games. I'll donate 25 cents instead and then drink at the end. But
without getting political, though, just like the movie just so like bending, like as we talked about it earlier, it can be really cool. There's a lot of cool stuff that they do with it within the show. This like expressive, just like all the crazy stuff you can do, like moving the terrain around you and stuff like that. And while it looks good in a cartoon form where you really have like limitless possibilities, it does not look so good in real life. Like you were talking about earlier with airbending, like visually, like you can see it within the cartoon, but in real life, when Aang, or as they say in the movie, Aang, because they don't like pronouncing names correctly, when Aang throws air at somebody to knock them over, he moves his hand, and a couple seconds later, a guy gets hit, and it just visually doesn't look good.
That was my biggest problem with the movie, was the way they just kind of like changed the whole premise of it. Especially like you get the firebenders, they come in with like their kettles of fire and they set them on fire and then they move it. I'm like, no, like firebenders can make fire like out of nowhere.
Exactly. Like, I had that same complaint. So what happened was like people told, M. Night Shyamalan is like, hey, firebenders, they're like, along with airbenders, they don't need a source for their bending. They can create fire, and like in order to dial down on the power level of the Fire Nation, he said, nah, they need a campfire wherever they go to use their bending. And it's just like,
and then it was a big deal at the end of the movie when Iroh like created fire. I'm like, no, the big deal is that he can breathe fire. Like in the show, that was the thing.
Yeah, that's like his nickname is the Dragon of the West, and he can breathe fire. And then in the show, in the movie, nah. Also, Iroh is not as cool in the movie, and that's my biggest complaint, because Iroh is like the coolest uncle you've ever met in the show. He's great, you love him, and then in the movie, he's just kind of not. I don't know the best way to describe it.
That's fair.
I have a quick question, because I know that there are going to be people who, know the Blue Avatar movie and don't know the other Avatars. Because like I'm also one of these people. No, I did not watch the Blue Avatar movie either, because it just looked weird to me. But so I know there was the animated TV series. Was there a movie too that was kind of a live action, or no?
So you have your original series, that's Avatar: The Last Airbender, 3 seasons of an animated cartoon series on Nickelodeon. A couple years later, you have the release of Legend of Korra, which is a sequel animated series, 4 seasons of that. And I believe at the same time, there's the release of the live action movie adaptation by M. Night Shyamalan of the show, the original show. And then also right now, Netflix is in the process of making a live action adaptation TV show of Avatar. So that's everything that's Avatar related.
So the Blue Avatar has nothing to do with the Avatar bending world.
That's James Cameron's vision through and through. I don't understand what it is.
And he's working on the sequels for that now too, and taking.
He has been for like 10 years. I know. I have no expectations anymore. Nobody cares about blue people Avatar anymore. I haven't cared since it came out, and I was.
He had the guts to predict that it'll outsell Endgame and he'll get the top spot back. I'm like, no.
No.
No one.
He doesn't have.
He should have released the sequel like 2 or 3 years after, when people still believed it was a cinematic spectacle. Now looking back on it, it doesn't even look good. Like, sure,
That's
it was
fair.
good for its time, but nobody cares anymore. People only watched it because it was really cool at the time. Now that's like yesterday's news.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the same vein as that though too. With the ending of the last Airbender movie, M. Night Shyamalan had the guts to end it on a cliffhanger where we see Azula, and I was like, "And you think you're gonna get the money for a sequel to this, and are gonna put that scene in where like you're saying like, I'm doing it. We're getting book 2." I'm like, "No, we're not."
Like they could tease Azula in the TV series because they were guaranteed to tell their story through to the end. So they knew they were going to see Azula, but instead, M. Night Shyamalan was like, "This movie, people are gonna like this movie. People are gonna like what I've done. People are gonna like when 6 Earthbenders do a little hoorah dance, and then they summon one little pebble to go hit somebody. That's gonna be cool."
Hey,
Yeah.
don't knock the pebble because, David and Goliath story. Come on. Pebble knocked
Yeah, but
down
when
the
in
giant.
the show you could a single Earthbender can make their own island.
Yeah,
That's
Alright,
like
fair.
that's just a whole different thing.
it was
So,
rough. But anyways,
It was rough.
Anyways,
Hope.
Last Airbender by M. Night Shyamalan, very bad. Don't see it. Unless you want to laugh, then see it.
It might be worth the laugh. So, Hope,
Don't
what
stray.
is your least favorite adaptation of all time?
Ooh. Okay, so this is hard for me because a lot of times I'll go see a movie or something and I'm like, oh, that's really good. But then, people later are like, it wasn't like the book or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to preface this with these were really good if they're on their own and not compared to their books. But if they're compared to their books, they're not that great. I don't know if anybody has started to guess this, but the Percy Jackson series. So, which I'm also going to say the musical is fantastic and it's kooky and crazy and beautiful.
There's a musical. For
There's a
Percy
musical.
Jackson.
No, there was a musical.
It's an off-Broadway musical. It's called The Lightning Thief. It was fantastic to watch. Of course, it was also a kids show, so all the adults are grumbling, that's not very good, and all the kids are like, it's awesome. It's kooky and great, and you just have to love it for what it is, because it's low budget and stuff too. And at one point, they used leaf blowers and toilet paper to emulate water, splashing out. It's great. But so definitely the sorry, my cat is next to me begging for attention, and he's also scratching me. So if I say "ow," that's why.
They do that.
But yeah. So the movies themselves were not that great. To start off with, the first one, if you read the books, you know that Percy doesn't. Nobody knows who Percy's godly parent is, and it's not until Poseidon puts a little symbol above his head that's a trident, and he's like, yeah, he's my kid. After all this water stuff happens, a water fountain exploding, the toilets exploding, and I mean the other thing is age, because the characters are really only supposed to be 11 or 12 years old and to 16 at the most. And I get for musicals and movies, it's hard to find young actors. I do get that. But also at the same time, if you're going to get older actors, make sure that you're staying true to hey, he's bullied and doesn't actually know his godly parent is. Not, here's this whole cabin for yourself with all of this awesome stuff because we know you're the son of Poseidon. No, the big three, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, were not allowed to have kids. And that's part of the whole thing. It's because one of the big three had a kid. And so they tried to fix some of it in the second movie by bringing in Clarice, who was, the bully in the first one. And they tried to bring in with Talia. I mean, they kind of had to with Talia because the whole point of Talia was that she was Zeus turned her into a tree and created the barrier around Camp Half-Blood. And the fact that Luke poisons her and the reason why the barrier is starting to fall apart, you kind of have to bring in Talia anyways. But there was a lot of character story and background that they didn't include, which was really frustrating to me. But like I said, if you don't read the books, the movies are great because you're like, oh, it's about Greek gods and half-bloods and all of that, and it's great. But if you're comparing it to the books, it's really not a good, adaptation at all. So.
Yeah, I remember as a kid being so disappointed by that movie because the series was like I feel like it was everybody's jam in like 6th grade, like middle school. Yeah. Like everybody loved those books and would watch them and would read them. And so yeah, to see like personally, I think the movie was like really bad. Like I know some people probably have like some feelings towards it. I don't know. I just thought it was. I guess it was less bad as it was just like disappointing, you know?
I can feel that. I remember watching.
No, go ahead, Brendan.
Okay, I remember watching Sea of Monsters on a plane, and I was like, I could have picked a better movie to watch. Like, because I remember I'm like, Lightning Thief was, because I think my biggest thing was like, they tried to go too fast. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you could have taken your time, done it, like you said, all these other like character arcs, but they immediately tried to get to the Titans like right away. I'm like, that doesn't become like a serious threat to like book 3. Like, yeah, they know, but like Easter eggs in movies is like super common. So like, wait till later.
Yeah.
But I feel like they just tried to get to that big threat really early. And I was like, it feels kind of rushed, especially in comparison to the books.
In Sea of Monsters too, what annoyed me was that Annabeth used an iPad to find information about the Golden Fleece, which like, okay, I get it, we're in modern day, but also they
Gotta
couldn't
pay for the movie somehow.
Well, they couldn't use technology in phones because it drew the monsters to them more. It was like another homing beacon, like their scent. I
remember that, from the book.
Yeah, and I was like, and Annabeth was supposed to be like this really booky character, and her area of Athena's cabin was supposed to be like covered in books, which I mean, all of Athena's cabin was covered in books, but like hers was more so because she just wanted a quest and wanted to prove to her mother that she was worth it. And like, I don't know, to have them just like, oh, here's an iPad, you don't have to do any work. It's like the second or third one in. And like the other thing, Dan, you were talking about everyone reading it in 6th grade, like these books were meant for kids like the Harry Potter series. Like, Harry and Ron and Hermione are 11 years old, when they start. And so it was supposed to be made for those kids. And then the movies just come in and you're like, well, great. I don't have anyone to identify with anymore because they're all older in their 20s. And I mean, that's part of the reason why they stopped making the movies, besides Rick Riordan and the entire fandom just going, stop making these. Because even Rick Riordan didn't like the movies. But it was like, the actors themselves were like, guys, we're getting too old to continue doing these stories. Like, you can tell we're not teenagers anymore. And so I'm excited for the TV series on Disney Plus to come out. I'm fairly sure it'll be on Disney Plus. Yeah.
That sounds like it.
It's a TV series, and like Rick Riordan's actually supposed to be like part of the whole casting and everything, and I'm like, please let it be good and actual children. As much as like I'm like, yeah, I'm 23 and I should probably not be watching a show with 11-year-olds in it, but also I want something.
Stranger Things was fun. Just because it's cast with kids doesn't mean.
Also, speaking of cast, I'm looking at the cast of the movie. I totally forgot that 1, Sean Bean was Zeus, and 2, Uma Thurman was Medusa.
Yep.
Like,
oh
what?
yeah,
they had like this was like a star-studded cast.
Yeah, and like that, so it got the movie to be good, but like
it had that potential. But
Stanley Tucci was Dionysus.
Yeah.
What?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was Dionysus.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And Nathan Fillion was Hermes. Like, what?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I'm just
that's
looking
in
at
the second
cast.
one. Like they were perfect for it.
Okay, that's good.
Like, but like,
and the movies were just terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's like you were saying, Dan, with Avatar, you had fans and everything saying, no, do this. And then they're just like, we know what we're doing.
I don't know. I feel like Hollywood needs to do more crowdsourcing. for all this stuff. But so I think we're getting close to our time. So before we wrap up, Hope, do you have recommendations to give to the audience for this week?
I do. Once again, I'm going back to Netflix because, I mean, we can't go anywhere and see anything. So an old show, I don't remember when it was exactly put out, but it is quite slept on, especially now that people aren't watching it. Merlin on Netflix. Again, I'm going with King Arthur, but this show is fantastic. The quips between Merlin and Arthur are hilarious and adorable. There's a definite bromance there that you see throughout the series that, like, Arthur tries to push off, but you know it's there. And then I'm going again with a teen show, Julie and the Phantoms. If you're a fan of any Kenny Ortega films, so yes, we're going Disney. It's High School Musical series, Hocus Pocus, Descendants movies. If you like any of those or any other Kenny Ortega, he did a show called Julie and the Phantoms about a girl who meets some ghosts and they form a band that's called Julie and the Phantoms. And they do explain how the ghosts became ghosts and everything. And Cheyenne Jackson, who played Hades in Descendants 3, well, he doesn't reprise Hades, but there was one interview that was like, yeah, you're kind of like Hades in this role too, because he's basically like overlord of ghosts, and it is, and he's fantastic as usual. And so yeah, I really recommend that one. The music is fantastic, and I jam out to it on my drive home, so it's great.
Sounds good. Dan, you got some recommendations for us this week?
Yeah, I have a gaming related recommendation. So it's been getting really popular recently. Granted, it just came out like a month or two ago. It's called Phasmaphobia. It's a horror game that you can play with your friends. It's really cool. Yeah, I see you nodding your head. It's really cool. It's really fun. It was, the developer team is literally just one guy who made it at his house, and it's I think it's like $5, $10, $15. I don't know. It's really cheap. It's on Steam. You should definitely buy it, support him, get it, and play with your friends. It's really not like a super like scary game, but like you just work together, try and like figure out like what kind of ghost the ghost is, find like clues and all that kind of stuff. It's really fun. I mean, if you turn off your lights at night, it's like midnight, you play with your friends, you might get a little spooked. But yeah, it's a good thing, especially with our little spooky season. Obviously, it might be past Halloween. Probably will be past Halloween by the time this comes out. But definitely check it out. Play with your friends. It's a good time.
If you have an active imagination, I know Dan said to play it at midnight with no lights and no one around you. Don't do it. Don't do it if you have animals either. I swear, my cat has given me 10,000 more heart attacks when I watch or do scary stuff in the dark. Don't do it. I mean, it might be fun if you have like friends over to
I'll
like
play
make
it in
sure.
the dark for sure. Like I'll wait for 2 a.m. just to like download it and start. Like my first experience has got to be 1 a.m. I love horror stuff, so
it's fun. It's a good game if you enjoy
awesome.
horror stuff.
Yeah, it's been on my radar, so I'll definitely have to start looking at it. Awesome. So I've got a couple of recommendations too. All of my things are I tried to be on theme when I was coming up with stuff. So all these things are adaptations, so you can look at the source material or the adaptation. Just got to plug them again real quick. Batman the Animated Series and Lucifer, both the comics and the show. Great. Lucifer's on Netflix. Batman the Animated Series is available on DC Universe subscription service. So if you have that, go for it. If not, find someone that has it. Definitely worth the watch if you haven't seen it. Definitely worth the rewatch if you haven't watched it in a while. I mentioned this one too earlier in the news section, but if you haven't seen The Boys, that's on Amazon Prime, also adapted from comics. But if you kind of like, I'm not going to say like dark humor, but like the show is really like gritty and unapologetic. So if you have a weak stomach too, probably not ideal, but the show is fantastic and it's a really good commentary on a lot of like social issues right now too.
I would also like to add the nudity in The Boys a couple of times.
Yeah, it is definitely like rated R. So it's not, if you have small children at home, either lock your door or wait till they're not there. It's not something that, it's not for younger eyes. But also, if you have seen the HBO series Watchmen, that was a little more recent, but the Zack Snyder film that was based off of the comics that were released in the 80s, the comics are fantastic. The movie's a great adaptation. I've only seen a couple episodes of the series, but I enjoyed it as well. In my opinion, Watchmen's like one of the greatest storytelling arcs in recent history. So definitely good to look in on, and on something less like sci-fi, on a less of a sci-fi note, if you have, there's an autobiographical comic book I read over the summer called Fun Home by Alison Bechtel that was adapted to a Broadway musical that was again adapted to a film with, let's see, who's in the cast of that one? There's a couple of names, but the only one I can think of right now, I believe Jake Gyllenhaal's in it. But it's the story of the author's like life growing up in her household that has, I don't want to spoil it. There's a lot of interesting things going on in there, but like it's kind of telling her story, and the way it was adapted, I thought it was really, really impressive. Kind of tackles some like personal and mental health issues too. So if that's something that interests you, definitely give it a look. And all right, that is all the time we have for tonight and everything we had to talk about. So I hope you all really enjoyed this episode. I had a blast, thinking about this stuff. And this is us signing off for the evening. So I've been Brendan Valentine with Dan Draper and Hope Gooderl, and we will talk to you all next week.